Hello, and welcome to this edition of Staying Global While Staying Home. I'm Lucy Newcomb, the CEO of the Newcomb Global Group, and your host today. And with me is Ieda Gomes. I'm so pleased to see her here as a part one of a series within a series of women at the top of their game. Hi, Ieda, how are you today?
Hi, Lucy. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today and talking to my favorite subjects.
Oh, thank you so much. We're really so pleased to have you. Did you want to say a quick word about the background behind you? It's so fascinating.
Yes, I decided to be sunny because we are in a very sunny summer. And this is my hometown, Salvador, located in the state of Bahia in Brazil, where I was born and did my university studies. And behind me, there is the fortress called Farol da Barra, an old Portuguese fortress that is now a tourist attraction, museum, and also the Navy has some business there.
Exciting times. Well, I wish we had like a time to do a tour of that, but we're here today to talk about your experience as a global board director. And I think I'll read just a few lines about your amazing background before we get started on our conversation. Ieda has a broad range of experience in the natural gas and energy and infrastructure industries with an international career spanning 35 years in the public and private sectors. She was a group leader with BP in various roles, such as country president of BP Brazil and vice president new ventures in the Middle East and South Asia. That must have been so fascinating. Prior to BP, Ieda was the CEO of the largest gas utility in Brazil, the São Paulo Gas Company. She is now an independent director of the Institute of Directors in the UK, Saint-Gobain in France, Exterran Corporation in the United States, Pruma Logistica in Brazil, and the Brazilian Chamber of Commerce in Great Britain. She is a senior visiting fellow at the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies in the UK and a senior advisor and member of the advisory board in a company's name. I apologize, I just don't speak Brazilian, in Brazil. Ieda is a founding director of Will Latam, Women in Leadership in Latin America, and an NGO promoting women and gender diversity in companies in Brazil and Latin America, and Access for Women in Energy, a platform to provide visibility for female speakers at events and conferences. She was awarded the Vive Clichot Business Woman of the Year in Brazil, and she holds dual citizenship in both Brazil and the United Kingdom. Thank you so much for being with us today. Do you want to start by telling us a little bit in a nutshell about where you see the energy sector today, especially in our uncertain times? We see an awful lot of comments about oil and petrol prices rising, and kind of give us your sense of the lay of the land from a very aerial view, and then maybe touch on a couple of the board director roles you'd like to talk about today in specific.
Yes, for sure. The energy sector the energy industry is suffering a radical transformation that started with the transition to net zero, because countries have signed up for the Paris Accord and agreement, and to reduce the emissions of CO2, that should be a radical transformation in terms of the way that we use and consume energy, particularly fossil fuels. There is a need to reduce fossil fuels demand and production in order to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement and reach net zero by 2050. So that's the first transition, a radical transformation, because you need to move from an economy that is based on petrol for cars, natural gas for heating your homes, for electricity, and coal for manufacturing and produce electricity, into an economy where based on renewables energy as one of the fastest growing type of energy technology nowadays, and find solutions for the CO2 and the methane emitted by the fossil fuels, like carbon sequestration, or reducing the consumption, reducing the production of these fossil fuels in order to meet these goals. So first transformation is the transition itself. And because of the transition, requires that we have intermediate goals, because 2050 is almost 28 years from now. But to reach net zero in 2050, countries, industries have also put intermediate goals by 2030 to reduce from 30 to 50, 60% the CO2 emissions, so CO2 carbon dioxide emissions, or greenhouse gases actually, because it's equivalent. Therefore, that's the principal impact of the transition industry have to rethink the way they manufacture their products, they consume their energy. But then came in the middle of this transition, that is a big transformation, the crisis arising also from the war, from the invasion of Russia, Ukraine invaded by Russia, which means that in addition to the transition, we now have a scarcity of fossil fuels that were necessary in a transition moment to reach your goals in the meantime, and that caused a huge increase in the prices of gas and electricity and oil as well. So natural gas in Europe, for example, in the hub that we call TTF, has spiked like 10 times. Oil prices more than double. Even in the USA, that is an exporting country and produce a lot of gas, Henry Hub has doubled. So in the middle of the transition comes this turmoil, and a lot of people have to adapt. In the meantime, you have also consumers and citizens that need electricity and need gas or need some sort of a fuel for heating in their homes. So that is a very, very crucial moment, because governments need to navigate into two types of objectives. One objective is the transition into cleaner environment and net zero, at the same time guarantee the security of supply, because you need security of supply as well to keep the houses warm. So that's a very interesting and very, I would say, mind-boggling scenario that we live in right now. So these are we that are in the energy sector that work with energy. We need to produce almost daily analysis on what's going on. And everything, small things like an LNG terminal in the US that stopped producing coals, prices spikes, anything related to the Ukrainian war situation produced more spikes. So the storage of gas in Europe being replenished, but not to the level that is necessary to go across the winter that approaches in a safe way. So very interesting times, like the British used to say.
Yes, and the Chinese. Yeah.
Exactly. In terms of my background in my boards, it's quite a diverse portfolio. As you mentioned, I was an executive with BP, and before that with Comgás, the gas distribution company in São Paulo. I used to work very internationally. And in 2011, I decided to do a career change. I want to be more in the non-executive, because I saw a lot of opportunities for people with expertise, experience, and executive experience to migrate to this, what I call portfolio career, where you sit in several boards. You can sit in boards in different countries, different sectors, tapping on the expertise, your experience as executive. So I embarked in this journey in 2011. And since then, I've been in the board of companies, as you mentioned, in several continents. That's quite rewarding, because each continent, each country has a different culture, a different way of doing business. It's been quite rewarding to me as well.
That's great. That's really exciting. And do you see yourself moving? I know that you also write a lot of articles. Do you feel an opportunity to move some of these complicated needles you mentioned inside these board roles, or is it primarily through your personal work, through your writing, or a combination?
You are invited to join boards based upon your industry experience and your executive experience as well. And once you are in the board, you try to use your expertise to help companies to navigate the business. A board of a company is formed of people with several industry experience, finance experience, governance experience as well. So it's like an orchestra, which each one contribute at the measure of their experience to the success of the company.
Okay, that's exciting to hear. Do you want to talk a little bit about, obviously some of these issues are confidential and sensitive, but is there a scenario in either respect, particularly on the board, where you had a chance to kind of influence things in a better direction, or at least in the direction that you felt was a better direction?
Well, we try our best to influence. That's why we're there. And the more you working together with other board members, you are more successful. I've been successful, for example, in terms of directing the company. One of my companies, they had a strategy based upon a single point of concentrated natural gas as the main hub. And I've been successful, I believe so, in directing the company to think more globally about energy as a whole. That includes renewable energy, includes other sorts of energy, because we need to think about the transition in the future, and being just concentrate, focus on gas. That is, in my view, is a transition fuel. In Brazil, is a transition fuel. It wouldn't take into account the future of the energy world. So thanks for my knowledge and that conversations and so on. I think we're now in a good place. We think about energy, being an energy hub more globally. That includes a lot of renewable energy as well.
Yeah, I would love to have just that conversation with you about, because of your amazing bicontinental involvement. It would be so interesting to have a comparative conversation about what's happening in the UK and the greater Europe. I'm careful with Brexit now to contextualize, versus Brazil, because I think Brazil is actually on the forefront of some of these developments.
Brazil, as a country, has one of the cleanest energy matrix. 85% of the electricity generated in Brazil comes from renewables. So 65 is hydro, and then wind has grown. In Brazil is mostly now onshore wind, but wind has grown dramatically. There are now 21,000 megawatts. It's nothing, it pales compared to the power of American capacity, but it's still more than 20% of is wind in Brazil. Biomass. Brazil has a lot of biomasses that comes from the sugarcane industry that used to produce electricity as well. Solar photovoltaic is ramping up. So Brazil has that's very clean energy matrix. However, what causes a lot of concerns in the international community is not the energy matrix of Brazil, it's the way that the Amazon region has been damaged by fires that cause a lot of emissions. So managing the forest and managing the fires in the forest is one of the big emitters. In Brazil also, because it has a very big agriculture sector, like the US, by the way. You know that in agriculture and cattle, they emit a lot of methane, and that's one of the emitters. So most of the Brazilian emissions do not come from the power manufacturer sector, come more from agriculture and management of forest. In Europe, we see Europe is the most advanced continent in terms of putting together net zero and pushing on net zero agenda. And most countries, now we have the European EU taxonomy that classify what kind of investments are considered green. So Europe is in the forefront in terms of net zero for sure, compared to any other part of the world.
That's amazing and very exciting, and how wonderful that you happen to come from Brazil and can really leverage that and be a voice, because it's probably still a well-kept secret how well Brazil is doing in terms of the energy matrix, etc.
Even in the transportation sector, Brazil developed, like the US, by the way, because US also produced a lot of ethanol from in Brazil is from sugarcane, in the US is more from corn. And also Brazil is, we have Brazil's gasoline, petrol, like we say in the UK,
Yes,
in
right.
the US is gasoline. It
Mhm.
is 27% ethanol mixed with the gasoline in Brazil. Plus, we have also the ethanol that is consumed raw in vehicles. And Brazil developed a very interesting technology that we call flex fuel. So a car that is designed with flex fuel, that's the majority of the new fleet or for many years now, can use any mix of ethanol in the gasoline. And then even if you use gasoline, it's 27% ethanol, and
Mm.
or you can use ethanol. So people, the consumer do some arbitrage between the price. When ethanol is very expensive, they consume more gasoline that contains ethanol anyway, or when the opposite. And diesel as well, now is mandatory in Brazil that now is about 12 or 13% of the diesel in Brazil is mixed with biodiesel. So it's quite an interesting place in terms of differentiate itself in terms of energy mix. Coal in Brazil is very little. We have very little coal,
Huh.
and nuclear is very little in Brazil as well.
Well, it's so amazing, and congratulations. I'm sure that when you were head of BP there and other things, that you've been a strong leader on many levels of impact. So thank you personally and in the broader sense professionally. So much of what I hear you talking about is relevant, of course, in the US, but even more so in Africa. So it'd be really exciting for that cross-pollination to happen when things are a little bit more out of survival mode. I think that's part of the challenge too, is having energy be a priority on people's agenda, right? Even in America with climate change, we're constantly having to move it up the agenda. So thank you for being a champion for that. For the rest of us who are rather attached to breathing.
Yes, Africa is a challenge, yes, because you have a population that lives in many countries below what we call in the Western world living standards, and they do not have access to any form of commercial energy. And these people aspire to also become middle class like we are. And in order to do that, they need to have affordable and reliable energy instead of cooking and walking kilometers and kilometers to collect wood for cooking. If you could have some gas, like bottle gas, or have natural gas or electricity, that would be much easier. But then the countries, maybe they leapfrog, maybe they develop other technologies that can be considered cleaner, because in some countries, sometimes it's possible to leapfrog. But nowadays, Africa is a conundrum because people need energy to live a decent life as well.
Yeah, amazing. Well, there's no shortage of opportunities, certainly from an educational level as well as the implementation level. Well, as we bring this back to kind of the topic of our webcast, navigating uncertainty, especially that driven by the pandemic, are there some silver linings that you've seen from situations like the pandemic in terms of these energy issues you've mentioned, or even in a broader sense?
I'll talk a little bit in the broader sense. You say when the pandemic hit in the beginning, I remember in several boards that I was participating. Like I remember February 2020 very vividly. Companies were informed about the pandemic. It was not yet considered a global pandemic and so on. And as they saw, no, this is going to disappear in a couple of months. So let's say we are in February, March is going to be hard, April is going to start recovering, and May will be full blown. Well, it didn't happen like that. You see what happened with all the lockdowns and the impact in several industries. So the transportation industry suffered a lot because people stay at home, they didn't travel, they didn't use their cars, also impact the consumption of oil products, because if you stay home, you don't need the petrol or diesel. So first impact was kind of are we going to survive? this crisis, unprecedented. Nobody was prepared because we had pandemics before, but in a kind of a shorter timeline. And this time was global, everybody locking down and people dying, people not sure whether we have hospitals sufficient to treat all these people. There was no vaccine, nothing. First things for companies was to assure liquidity, to make
Mm.
sure that have sufficient cash to pay our ongoing expenses, paying people. So governments also step up and put some furlough schemes helping companies not to fire the employees. If they don't fire the employees, they would receive government money. So first thing, liquidity, ensuring first that employees and suppliers were paid. And secondly, ensuring the safety of the employees, because I start to see how do you deal with your employees? You cannot vaccinate, there is no vaccine. In the hospitals, it's a new disease, nobody knows how to treat. So first thing, start working from home. And that happened in like 2 months, have to adapt to this new circumstance. What more amazing was technology that resulted. So there was a need. You need to keep going, and some companies need to keep operating about having people from home. So develop all these marvelous webinars and working from home and that technology to make sure that people could connect and do their jobs from home. So that's one very important thing resulting in the pandemic that I think is there to stay, because more and more people say, oh, I want to stay part-time working from home, part-time going to the office, and that's technology allowed that to happen. In terms of silver lining, I'll say there was 2 companies that I can bring an example for you. One is a company that was heavily involved in the port company, very involved with the community. That brought for the company, because being a port company, you cannot afford to stop the port because you need to bring merchandise ships. Albeit we had the pandemic, the port needs to keep open. So you need to put very strict protocols to ensure that your employees in the port do not stop the port to operate critical infrastructure. At the same time, that was an opportunity for us to engage with the community, because they say that's our role, to help the community that is suffering to navigate this crisis as well. So we brought a lot of equipment, donate equipment for hospitals, for clinics, and important as well, we engaged the community, people that couldn't sell their produce because there was no way to go there to buy their produce, small agricultural outlets. We bought their produce, say, let's buy their produce, so make these people continue to have a way of living. So that was the first silver line, engaging with the community, ensure that we are good citizens and that we are there for them. So that was one of them. And the other one, that's a different one, is a more commercial opportunity. I'm in the board of a company that is in the construction industry. And the silver line is that people working from home, they want to improve their houses. They said, oh, I want my house is not appropriate. I need an office. I need to do this. I need to renovate my house. And that creates a lot of demand for construction products. People want to stay in a beautiful house or improved house or more comfortable houses so they can work more comfortably. So generate a lot of opportunities for the renovation business in many markets.
That's amazing. We had a similar situation here. We have a franchised situation where people can, you might call it a thrift store, where people can donate their goods, called Goodwill. Helps disabled people. They get, and you had to actually get at the Goodwill hours ahead of time at the height of the pandemic, because people were home and they decided they must sort these rooms out, these box rooms that have, just been a disaster. And when you're working and, you don't really notice it. So it's interesting, these unintended consequences. And I'm glad for you as a board member. I imagine the company did very well that year.
Yeah, and actually some companies that have manufacturing capabilities, that's another outcome of the pandemic. They start to manufacture their own PPEs. So they changed their manufacturing line and say, oh, if I can manufacture this, I can also manufacture masks, I can manufacture tubes and so on. So that was another adaptation from the crisis for companies with manufacturing capabilities.
That's amazing. You know, we have I don't know if it's a constitutional amendment or a law that allowed the president here in the United States to basically circumscript companies. So auto companies had to stop making cars and make PPE, but I never heard about them making PPE for themselves. I'm sure that they did. That would have been smart. So like you said, and as we know from our work in innovation, both of us and each of us, constraint births innovation. And certainly I appreciate the ones you've mentioned today, most unusual and fascinating. Well, Ieda, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us just that we haven't discussed today?
Take into account that the driving force behind the network, a global network. And we had the opportunity to work together in some ventures in our not-for-profit life. I think a big message, important message for everybody that wants to build a portfolio career is to engage, network, be always ready to participate in events like this, because not only you help other people, but also you help yourself by educate yourself and being visible. In a world like that, a virtual world, being visible in events like that is very important for everybody's career. And thank you very much for the opportunity, Lucy. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's been wonderful to have you today. And thank you for the opportunity to work together on that movement venture. I think meeting you was the highlight. I say that sincerely. And I'm so grateful that it ended up as a result of being able to share your wisdom with our audience today. Thank you again for taking the time to be with us. Please join us again next month when we speak with Tan Sri Nurul Ener from Malaysia. Nurul has been the highest civil servant, we would call that chief of staff here, in 3 different ministries, and is also now on boards and advisory boards, completing this 2-part series within a series on women at the top of their game. I'm Lucy Newcomb, CEO of Newcomb Global, and hope you'll think of us if you're ready to reach out into global markets or develop your company's or your own global leadership capacity. Thank you very much. Bye, Ieda. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.